with small farms, and it's also happened with small, but like so small food producers as well that have been all gobbled up and consolidated. It's an economic situation, but it also impacts social and political
Yeah.
concerns as well.
Oh, of course. Now, my in-laws um, had a grocery store on the first floor of their house.
Hmm.
When they bought the building, maybe 1919, we're going back a while, they
Hmm.
lived behind the store, and the big move was to go upstairs to have their own apartment.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's the classic, they live behind the store. That's every immigrant's tale.
Right. Hey, it was a
And they wax so sentimentally about the idea of 7 people living in 2 rooms. I'm serious. My mother used to wax ecstatic about her memories of her mother's little grocery store, and the family lived behind it, and the people coming from the boat would stay. And when you think about it rationally, this is 7 people living in 2 rooms.
Mhm. Wow.
Where was
there
this?
This was in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, and my family was from the Bronx.
I know.
Where in Brooklyn?
I think Williamsburg, but I am not totally sure of this. It might have been in early Flatbush, because the move was from the Lower East Side to maybe the Bronx, but maybe Williamsburg, and then maybe Flatbush,
Mhm.
as Brooklyn kept pushing east.
Yep. Wow. I just think there's so many stories about the immigrant experience, about small businesses, about small communities that people knew each other. You could see why people would want to wax romantically about a time when
Yeah,
there was a sense of connection.
Not if you live there. The aim was to get out of the Bronx.
yeah. And away from your mother-in-law or your aunts or everybody who was telling you what to do with your life. There's a reason people chose to live in nuclear families.
Mhm.
No, seriously.
Yeah, no, I'm I'm an empty nester as of September. My daughters both went off to college, and now they're returning for the holidays, and my wife and I dread it.
Yeah.
Not that we don't love our kids and everything like that, but it's been so quiet and calm, and we've almost had like a second. We just had all this time to spend attention on each other, and it's been so delightful and fun, and taking walks, and hey, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? So we've had a great.
I'm going to put on my own iPad and see
all the drama and all the
what
stuff.
the trick. If there's a trick, I can tell you.
I'm lucky. We're both lucky though. So, well, let me
The join meeting, and so it should say, "Oh, okay." At the top, it says meeting.
I'll let you do the rest of
Okay,
his.
do you see where it says join meeting?
But let me see. I'll do some kind of low-level introductions about myself and who I am. As I
Good.
mentioned to Sandra, I grew up in Newton. I watched the original Newton North High School get torn down, the new one get built, and then that one get torn down, and the new one get built. So I've been in 3 Newton North High Schools since the early 70s, since I've lived there.
So it's,
And having arrived at
join a
was
meeting, not a
step up.
meeting. Join a meeting.
Oh, you have to say that again, Sandra. What was that question?
No, to get to Newton was a big step up.
Sure.
My mother grew up in Brooklyn. She
All right,
was
well, I've asked. So I've asked
And
Amanda, I don't know if she'll be able to, but I've asked Amanda
ended up going to Brandeis.
to swing by
I
and
went to
get you on.
What
And
year?
we'll see.
You've got two other Brandeis people here.
Right, exactly.
I love
You're going to join a meeting, you type in Rabbi
She
Jim.
was there to get her
and-
PhD, her master's degree in her
Right,
PhD.
yeah, exactly. So and I see Laura is on.
Well,
so Laura
let's
can-
ask
okay.
Rabbi Jim
Sounds
to
good. Thanks,
go
Sean.
someplace else.
What was that?
He's trying to get people on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we're having
You're
some
making
technical.
too much noise, Rabbi Jim.
Well, there is something brand new. I've never been told I make too much noise. Believe me.
Absolutely.
The first time
Never
ever.
happened to me.
So Laura Baber, you're on. Laura, Lillian Savage, Lillian Savage is trying to get on. Marilyn Dinesh is in with her. Oh, you're home though. I see. You're not in the building. All right. I wrote to Amanda trying to get her to help, but anyway, I apologize for as usual.
Okay,
we always have technical issues trying to get people onto the show. So we're going to keep on trying here. But in the meantime, I'm going to introduce Rob. I'm so excited that he is joining us. It's really great. Rob is, as you can see, not only a musician who plays all kinds of different string instruments from his backdrop there. He is also a friend and the father of two remarkable young women who are basically the same age as my kids, so they grew up together, which is great. And so I was mentioning at some point that we were having this series, and it hit me. Oh my gosh, why haven't I asked Rob to join us? And so this is what he does professionally, as well as you can tell already. It's a passion for him personally. So Rob, I'm going to let you do your own introduction. I'm going to run over and try to get to the other building to try to get these other people on. So if there's technical difficulties, unfortunately, I'm going to make you a co-host, Rob. So
Yeah, and I can let people in and
right. Yeah, exactly. So you can. So now I think you can mute people, which you may sometimes need to do, because people like me make a lot of noise. So
Right, absolutely.
All right. So without further ado, Rob, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jim, and I want to thank you for having me. It's a real privilege to be able to share the things that I have so much interest in. And as I was telling Sandra, my background is I'm currently I work in the area of sustainability at the Environmental Protection Agency. They have an office here in Boston, Region 1. I've been there for 20 years, and my goal there has really been to help businesses become more profitable by reducing their energy use, their water use, and the material use, the use of toxics, and thereby also lightening or reducing their environmental footprint. So it wasn't called sustainability when I first started. It was just thought of sort of good environmental practices, but now we use that term sustainability. And meanwhile, a friend of mine suggested that I start working with grocery stores, and I can remember my boss saying, "Why would you ever want to do anything?" I'm sorry?
Lillian's on.
Lillian's on.
Awesome.
Hello, Lillian. Amazing.
They're saying you're on.
Oh, is that
Greetings, Lillian.
what they
Good.
just announced? Hi, nice to see you.
Hi,
Nice to see you too.
Thank you.
And so my boss at the time said, "Why would you ever want to do anything with grocery stores? Because they're just kind of big boxes that have other boxes in them, and it's all food anyway. So we're not really dealing with anything that's hazardous or has any sort of environmental laws associated with it." And we really were overlooking a lot of the important issues that not only grocery stores are involved in, but all food businesses, be they restaurants, be they institutional food producers or service providers like in hospitals and universities and government facilities and prisons and bases, and also the manufacturers themselves. And so I started to focus on this and read books, and then that led to started to teach a course for an undergraduate course at Tufts, and then I started teaching a graduate course at the Urban Environmental Policy Department, and then I was asked to teach a course at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutritional Science and Policy, and it just every time, every semester that goes by, I just learn more and more, and it just doesn't end. And the one thing I want to say is when I actually got my master's degree at Tufts University, and they didn't talk about in environmental policy, and food was not a concern or an issue. Maybe people talked a little bit about pesticides or maybe a little bit about water pollution in food, but it wasn't thought about holistically. And I think it was just such a big, it was a humongous issue, just so large, almost like the air that we breathe, the food that we eat every day, that it was hard to start thinking about it in a really pragmatic, holistic way. Anyways, that brings me to what I want to talk to you about today, which was a question that I had. And the question was, I've been watching how businesses have been becoming more sustainable for the last 20 years, and it's always based on profit. It's always, they have to make some kind of profit. And I was unclear exactly about the profit that was being conferred to businesses when they decided to make food that was sustainable, that had some kind of sustainable marking or quality about it. It seems sort of obvious, but when you started looking at it, it was, as you'll see, there was some indicators, but it was unclear as to what the actual evidence facts were. And so, so what I'm going to do today is we're just going to go over these two sort of discoveries that were made about the drivers and trends around food that's sustainable. And I hope you enjoy it. And let me share my screen. And I've got lots of charts. Unfortunately, I'll try to describe them very in a fun way. And we'll get this going here. Let me see if I do my desktop and I share. And let me go to my, oops, go to my,
He's trying to access something that he wants to show you.
yes. So I'm going to just do my little slideshow here. And I'm
Can
hoping.
you hear? You're not hearing.
I'm hearing some things, but not all that. I know, either which way I'm not.
So I'm hoping that you guys can see a screen right now that says Sustainability Soul Search. Is that can people see
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, good. We're good to go. So I love that, Sustainability Soul Search. Nice title there. And the topic of my presentation is about sustainable food drivers and trends. And one thing that I understood, there's sort of three key drivers when you think about sustainability, and mainly around profits. This is my temple of profit here. I hope you like it. You can see the dollar bill sign. And what it's saying is that there's really, companies are looking for increased sales, or they're looking for operational cost savings like energy efficiency, or they're looking for a new area of sustainable investing, something that has actually cropped up. It's completely new. It has not really been something that was driving company behavior until very recently. And similarly, green demand, there's always been a market for green products, and particularly food products, but they've always been on the margins. But something's changed. And I want to show you how things have changed. So first, we're going to look at these two main areas of sales and then sustainable investing. And we're not going to look at cost savings because that'll be for a future time. So something you should know, of course, as I mentioned, that there's always been a grand interest in organic food and healthy food. This is a picture of the John Mackey, he's got the big afro in the middle. He's wearing a yellowish shirt. He borrowed $48,000 from family and friends and bought a first store. It was called Safeway I think it was in 1978. And it was an organic vegetarian store in Austin. And if you don't know, John Mackey is the owner of Whole Foods. He over 30 years was able to acquire a large number of other stores in Boston. We had Bread and Circus was the local chain, which he ended up buying, or his business ended up buying. And in 2017, he sold his 472 stores to Amazon for $13.7 billion. So he invested $48,000 back in 1978 and then sold it for over $13 billion in 2017. When he started his store, and as you guys would remember, the organic produce business was a real fringy thing. Not everyone did it, right? It was something that maybe in certain neighborhoods in Cambridge and Jamaica Plain that was happening, but it wasn't mainstream. So I wanted to talk about this change here and what happened. And so we're going to look at a couple studies that will help us all understand what took place. The first study that I want to look at is done by Deloitte. They're sort of a management investing or consulting company. And back in 2015, they wrote a report that said it was about capitalizing on the shifting consumer food value equation. That's a complicated way of just saying what's going on with purchasing, with consumer purchasing around food in this country. And they went and they interviewed a bunch of people. I think it was about, do I have my number here? It was about 5,000 individuals to get an understanding of what was going on. And what they saw was that there was a rise in new consumer concerns. So in this chart here on the left-hand side, you can see that gray area. The standard traditional consumer concerns was always price, taste, or the quality of the food, and the convenience. Those are the champion concerns that consumers had. And what the report found was when they were interviewing people about why they're purchasing food, they realized that there were these other concerns that came up as well. Shifting consumer food value, there's a new equation for how to understand this value that consumers saw. And they saw that these additional concerns were being added of health and wellness, safety, social impact, like fair trade, experiences, and transparency, or transparent meaning understanding the food supply chain, where their food came from. And together, all of these other concerns, these completely new concerns, were weighting more and more heavily on consumers, and until they're basically at the point in 2015, it was just a little over 51%. These evolving consumer concerns, and that they actually were weighting on whole these other concerns pretty much on par with the three main concerns of price, taste, and convenience. And so that's something that we can see this has been cropping up and that was in 2015. I wouldn't be surprised if those sort of concerns were even larger today. There's some particular pieces about this study which I want to share. One is that the study found that these concerns did not shift that much by region, by age, or by income. And the chart that you see here, you'll notice that there's underneath region, there's sort of a gray chart, and it's broken down into Midwest, Northeast, South, and West. And you can see that the areas of the lighter bars on the left are the traditional concerns, and the darker bars on the right are the new evolving concerns. And you can see they're all about equal. They're pretty much equal, meaning that there's not a lot of variation by region in terms of this trend. Similarly with age, you would think that a lot of the Younger people would be more concerned about this, but in the 18 and to 34 group, they had a concern of around 52%, but people who were from 50 to 80 had a 51% interest. Not much of a difference. So it didn't really matter how old you were. This shift was also impactful. And then also when it came to income, similarly, it was actually, you could see that there's the wealthier you became, you did have a greater propensity to these new values, but not tremendously. So the takeaway here is that the entire consumer group is actually assuming these new concerns and values in ways that we just haven't seen in the past. Does anyone have any questions? I'm just going to go on to this next thing, but it's I hope you find that interesting. It's I think we've always sort of known this, but it's nice to have a study done that just shows it. And so there's another take on this. It's a little more of a specific, deeper dive into this information, but from another whole group. And this is the Natural Marketing Institute. They did a study in 2020, which looks at the lifestyles of health and sustainability, the LOHAS. These are called the LOHAS indicators. And they do this every year or two. And they go and they interview about 4,000 consumers and ask them,
Come closest to it.
what is very important to you? When you're purchasing food, tell us what is very important. And then the chart here basically shows what their findings are. And at the top, you see things like great tasting. 68% of the people said that great tasting food was really important. Great value, nutritious. Those are the top three. The top fourth one is fresh and less processed. And then if you go all the way down, what this sheet here shows is that the yellow bars are the sort of the conventional attributes that one might have, or according to this study, they consider these more conventional concerns of people who are interested in health and sustainability. And the green ones are the ones that are sort of, you could call them up and coming or newer ones. The point here really is, and down at the bottom, you can see things, about a third of the respondents said that compostable packaging and grass-fed for dairy products and locally grown and cage-free eggs and from farms that practice sustainable agriculture and minimal packaging and USDA certified. Those things are all kind of about a third of the respondents that those were very most important. The point that I want to make here is that, remember, in the beginning, people just cared about taste, the cost, and the convenience, and now there are all these other concerns that consumers have. And on whole, if you add them up, you can see how they're creeping into our decision-making processes. This chart here just shows that how much these are not static numbers, but they wanted to see how much these are growing over time. And so concerns with being for vegan and vegetarian lifestyle, that between 2012 and 2019, those concerns grew by 170%. For fair trade ingredients, that was a 97% increase. For free range cage, 74%. For farms that practice sustainable agriculture, remember that was free range and farms that practice sustainable agriculture, they were on the bottom of the list. Same thing with grass-fed, that was on the bottom. They're all growing pretty substantially, double digits, between 2012 and 2019. Whoops. Oh my goodness. Sorry guys. I touched my who knew how sensitive my computer was going to be. So you can see here that not only are there a large number of concerns, but they're actually growing as well. And some of the ones that are the smallest seem to have, they're on the radar in terms of how quickly they're growing. So,
question here, I think.
Yeah, question?
Okay, I guess I'm interested maybe in where these samplings were done, because you've got a very substantial chunk of the population that isn't even within easy access of a grocery store, let alone able to make this kind of choice.
Right. And there's another hidden weakness. And so I'm going to answer your question, but let me just fold it into this other point because they're related, and it has to do with how substantial, how much do you really know when you're asking consumers about their opinions, right? There's a bias in terms of who answers the survey. There's a bias in terms of who's being surveyed. There's a bias in terms of even who knows what grass-fed is or cares about it. So there's all these biases that skew this information. So I would say that these are just, what I just showed you right now are one kind of indicator. And historically, the way that LOHAS has worked and the study that Deloitte did would get shown to food companies and as evidence of how their consumer market is really shifting. And you know what the reply is? That doesn't tell me anything. These are all these biases here. And sure, you could have a very vocal and ardent group of consumers, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily buying anything. I mean, there's a big difference between what people say they're going to do and then what people actually do. Not always, but that happens, right? So the point is that this was called the green paradox. Do consumers really purchase the products they say they want? Well, amazingly, actually not that amazingly, this question can be answered pretty definitively. And it was done by, oh boy, it was done by the New York University Stern School, their Center for Sustainable Business, who did a very unusual thing. They went and they worked with a big data company, and they asked the data company to look at a huge number of what's called consumer packaged goods, CPGs. These are the goods that are in grocery stores, big box stores, convenience stores, drug stores. They looked at about 71,000 different SKUs or product categories, and over a 5-year period, they from 2013 to 2018, they looked at about 40% of all of the purchases that were being taken that have take place in the CPG category. This is an enormous amount of information. And they wanted to see where sustainability fell within this. And is everyone ready for do I have your attention? You want to find out what happened? So this is essentially what they discovered, is that, well, they had the research question, was have purchases of sustainable products increased over time over this period? And the result was that products marked as sustainable are driving not only product but also total category market growth. That's a complicated way of saying that there was tremendous amount of growth, specifically with products that were deemed to be sustainable, including food products. So what they discovered, and now remember, this is for all kinds of products. They discovered that between 2013 and 2018, that the sales for the sustainably marked products went from 88 billion to 113 billion dollars, and so there was a quite an uptick. Every year, you can see that there's increased sales that are taking place.
That's constant dollars
So those are in 2000 and
or current dollars?
I think those were in 2000 and I think it was normalized with 2018 dollars. That's my memory.
Okay.
But that's a good question. So that was so looking at those sustainably marked products, and these are products where there is a label on it that relates to health, it relates to transparency, environmental impact, social impact. It was a pretty broad section, but it was products that were trying to differentiate themselves as having some sort of social or environmental benefit attached to them, other than just we're food. So it was also discovered that that when you look at the share of these products, these sustainably marked products, they were about almost 17%, 16.6% of the total of the total share of the market. So so they're a minority of the products that are being sold. But when you looked at in terms of their growth, they accounted for about 50% of growth for the entire CPG market. It's a large growth. So I think over this time the entire market probably grew about 2 or 3%, and they were about half of that. And it was coming from this very small category of products. So we know that it's overall. And then they want to do a comparison of the growth between this chart here basically shows the purple line at the top, those are the sustainably marked products. You look at the total market, that's the orange line. And then you look at, and so that's all the products that are sold at the orange line. And then when you look at just conventional products that don't include sustainability, you can see what the growth was in comparison between those years, 2013 on. So for sustainability marked products, there was a 4.5% growth. The total market had about a 1.35, and then percent growth, and then conventional was less than it was at 0.8% growth. And as you can imagine, most food products in the U.S. pretty much only grow at the percent of growth in the population. It's very inelastic. So essentially, you can have some things. You could buy lots of different shoes. You could buy as many shoes as your wallet can handle. But people pretty much only eat as much as their stomach can handle in that day. And so there's something called the stomach ceiling that really prevents growth beyond population growth. So to have growth that's in the 4.5% range is kind of outstanding from a marketing standpoint. So the point of this chart here is that when you start breaking all this down between products, you can actually see that when you're comparing product to product, like for example, let's just look at milk. All right, milk, the actual milk, the conventional milk actually had negative sales growth, but when you add milk that has grass-fed or some other sustainable marked attribute to it, it was growing at almost 45%. So what this chart shows is it compares the sustainably marked products to those that are in the same category as those that are not sustainably marked. And you can just see that there's a tremendous difference between these two categories. Here's another way of looking. Here's just breaking it down in another way. There's some categories where the share was, you saw 18% or above in terms of that differential, in terms of that growth. And from a food standpoint, these included things like crackers and cheese and fresh bread and salty snacks and bottled juices and coffee, milk, and yogurt. They all had over 18% in terms of their the sustainable products in terms of their growth. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I'm mischaracterizing this. This is the share of the overall category. So when you're looking at certain products, you might say, how much out of all the milk has some sort of sustainable marking to it? And some categories are very well represented by sustainable products. So that includes these products on the right-hand side, the ones that are over 18% in terms of how much those sustainable products are represented within their food group. So crackers and cheese and bread and snacks and juice and coffee and milk and yogurt are highly represented. Things like frozen dinners and soups and cereals, not as much. And then in a very small level, you've got carbonated drinks, energy drinks, cookies, and chocolate candy. Typically don't have a lot of sustainability attributes. The other items here, you can see things like facial tissue or toilet tissue that are well represented in the 5% to 18% share. You can see other things that are less well represented. So this chart here is really to show you how much saturation there is within the market, and we can see that different products have different levels of product categories have different levels of saturation of sustainability. So some people might say, well, there's growth. We can focus on certain things like laundry detergent or toothpaste or maybe even pet food and try to boost those sales with sustainability claims.
Question.
And so,
Rob, a quick question here.
yeah. Mhm.
Well, I hope it's quick, but if you've got all of this growth on the demand side, what does it imply on the supply side? Do we have agribusiness starting in to do sustainable growth patterns instead of wrecking the land and so on? Or are these new producers coming in, or what do we have on the other side of this equation? Or is it simply the same bunch of producers charging more money?
Right. And so I love that question because you could market things, but is it just, you're just putting some, puffery on and some,
Yeah.
boneless claims on your product, juicing up the sales that way. And so, this gets to the second half of what I want to talk about. By the way, we're ending at 2:30. Is that right?
Right, 2:30. We can, with the permission of the people in the group, we started a little late because of the technology. So I don't know, Rob, if you have an extra 5 minutes and everyone else has an extra 5 minutes, we can do it. Otherwise, we don't need to.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just want, I try to, people have things to do and I'll definitely hang around, but I gotta move things forward a little bit. So that question, like, what's real? How do we know that companies are changing? This gets to the second half of the thing that I wanted to show everybody. And it has to do with this other trend. So that relates to sort of, doesn't really relate anymore to shopping. It relates to this other area that's a driver, which is sustainable investing. One of the three pillars that companies are sort of being influenced by. And sustainable investing, I don't know if a lot of people understand this term. It's a pretty new, somewhat new term, and there's a lot of different organizations with different purposes and goals that have been using lots of terms, and I'm just using sustainable investing because I think it's the best umbrella term, but people will argue about what the right term is. It doesn't really matter. All of these terms, in my mind, are focused on understanding how a company is benefiting society and or the environment. And there's a lot of terms like ESG stands for environmental, social, governance investing, or social investment, or green investment, or ethical investment, or community investment, sustainable investment is one I like to use. Responsible investment, and then impact investment. I don't know if you ever heard of any of these, but these are all terms where that are focused on how people invest their money and what the company is actually trying to do to make the world a better place. And just from a historical standpoint, there's been a history in terms of the ethical concerns around companies. In the beginning, the way the sustainable investment approaches took was really restrictive. It was like, we'll invest your money to say you're a pension fund. We'll invest your money, but we'll make sure to stay away from alcohol and tobacco or casinos and firearms, fossil fuel, nuclear power, because that's how we're going to put your money to best use. We're going to screen out the bad actors, right? That's called sort of restrictive investment. Then you've got positive investment, where there's more of an active focus on companies that are doing things that you actually approve of and are interested in, like organic food manufacturers or sustainable fishing companies. And then more recently, there's something called impact investment, where these are companies that are not just trying to do the standard type of activity or things that are conventionally good, like growing and selling organic food, but to do something that there's a change, they're a change maker, they're a disruptor. And so they might focus on food hubs or regenerative farming or clean energy, doing microfinance or community development. So more than ever, investments are being used as a tool for positive change. And that affects the food world, of course. And the thing that is really amazing is, I've been working at the EPA for 20 years, and there's always been a green investment or a sustainable investment cadre out there. And not unlike organic foods, and it's been somewhat on the edges of the investment world. And that has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Well, it started to change dramatically in the 10 years. What this chart shows is the rise in, we'll call it the environmental, social, and governance, sustainable investing portfolios over since 1995 to 2020. And starting in about 2010, you began to see this real powerful uptick in terms of the amount of money that's being managed underneath this sort of ESG or sustainable investing category. And it's been a pretty strong uptick. Now it's about $17 trillion worth of investment. When you look at all of the professionally managed assets in the US, it's about a third now of all those assets are considered to be sustainable investment assets. Now, that is an incredible change. How has it sort of, or I should say, like, why is this happening? You may ask. Well, one is that consumers are demanding these sustainable stocks. Some of this are just millennials who feel that they want to put their money in places, in businesses that are more socially and environmentally responsible. But also, pension funds feel that they might, or organizations that have ethical or religious affiliations have always been interested in this. So there's demand there. And also from a performance standpoint, studies show that these SRI funds perform as well as traditional stocks. In the beginning, there've always been claims that these stocks perform better, or they perform a lot worse because it takes more management and more effort to focus on these things. But right now, the studies show them to be about equal. There's no real difference that people can find, except that there are a number of proponents who say that these businesses will perform better for two reasons. One is that the idea is that if management has their act enough together to focus on these additional concerns, that it means that they run a tight ship. It's like if you go to someone's house and everything looks nice and clean and tidy, you're thinking that they have things under control. They know what's going. So they're indicators of managerial performance. And then some people also say that these businesses are taking a longer view towards their profitability. A lot of sustainability objectives are long-term. And so for institutions that want to invest money over the long term, they want to put their money in businesses that are looking 10 and 20 years out, as opposed to those that might have strategies that maybe have short-term profits, but then they could fall apart. And another interesting reason for why these types of stocks are becoming more and more popular is that in the beginning, all of these sustainability attributes that these stocks had were just sort of hearsay. They were just sort of, oh, we're a green company. Oh yeah, we do work with organic food. But what's happened is that all this information is becoming highly analytic. It's getting parsed and tracked in ways that analysts are gobbling up. They just love this extra amount of information that is provided. And so they feel they have got more control and a deeper understanding, not only about products, what they say in terms of their benefits, but more importantly, they use them as screens for risks. Is this company, for example, does it having problems with its union? Are they going to have a big strike? Are they having problems with environmental pollution? And will the community do something about that? Are they going to get involved in a legal suit? So they see this additional information as a way to screen out, to identify and potentially screen out risks that a company could have. Bloomberg is the largest collector of financial information, and they've moved quickly into the area of ESG. And I just want to give you an example of some of their they're focusing on how to score companies, and I have a little page here that just shows some of the things that they're really interested in. So Bloomberg wants you to buy their analytical information, and they have scores that they've created on companies. Everything from their environmental and social scores, which track corporate environmental and social performance on dozens of financial material and industry relevant issues. I skipped over the top bullet, which is board composition. So they're looking at is there diversity among their board? What are the roles that the board plays? How independent is the board? Really diving down into that. That's underneath the governmental part of ESG. So these things can now really actually be understood, identified, and tracked. Another one is environmental and social news sentiment scores. So Bloomberg will actually go and check out news articles and reports and see how well a company is doing in terms of their performance there. Are they getting in trouble? Are they doing good things? Their disclosure, the ESG disclosure score, this rates a company at how transparent it is. Is it really providing information to the public and to regulators? Or is it holding its cards close to its chest? There's another one called the Bloomberg Gender Equity Index Score, which assesses the company's progress towards gender equity in the workplace. I mean, these levels of scrutiny and being able to, thanks to analytics and big data, be able to find this information is a completely new thing that, it's really changing how companies operate, because there are now not only fighting to become good corporate citizens, but they're trying to become the best corporate citizens they can be, at least in terms of these kinds of indicators. Where we see this, how you might say is like how do companies sort of report this information? Sorry about this. It's very difficult to move back and forth between slides. So there are these reports that companies do called corporate social responsibility reports. They're not always annual, but many of them are. And this chart shows that between the early 90s, 1993 to 2020, there's been a tremendous increase in the amount of reporting that companies have been making. So the top blue line is coming from what's called the G20 250. Those are the largest 250 companies in the world. 96% of them are publishing reports that are revealing a whole new type of information about their governance, around their operations, around the goals that they're setting, around their environmental and social performance. This other line is a smaller set of companies, but a much broader set of companies. It's called the N100. And they take the largest 100 companies from every nation, and they ask if those companies are the ones that are doing the, if they're publishing their corporate social responsibility reports. And so that is the basically these charts to show that among large companies, there's a tremendous amount of interest in trying to show themselves as popular as good corporate citizens. So as the popularity of corporate social responsibility grows, we're now seeing companies that are this is actually changing how they operate in a lot of really fundamental ways. Now, similarly to the marketing side of things, the world of CSR can be spun too. You can write reports and say all these have these glossy photos of how you're supporting farmers or feeding, supporting unrepresented populations. But how do you actually know what's happening? So that's where a lot of the transparency comes in, and we're hoping that these reports will not only up the ante in terms of transparency, but also in terms of how faithful and real these actions are, and in terms of how substantial the actions are. So I've got one story. So I have my students that go out and they conduct these reports. Some of them go and interview companies, and one that just took place a couple months ago, a student was able to interview the top sustainability manager of the it was a large packaging company that they create cans mainly for like Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola. And oh wait, could you guys hold it for 1 second?
If everything is so glorious, why is the planet going to hell in a handcar?
That's right. I think that's a good question.
All right, guys, sorry. So the point that I want to make is that in this interview that was done, the CEO of sustainability said that, for years and years we've always known about energy efficiency activities that we could take. We've always known they have been there. It just haven't been a priority. But as soon as our investors started coming to us and saying, we need your company to participate and become up their score in terms of environmental sustainability, that's when they moved, and they moved really fast. And so they set some scientific goals for their climate change activities, and so that so what I believe we see is that the impact that sustainable investing has on the C-suite, on the corporate leaders, is very powerful, and may be even more powerful than just the basic consumer increase in where we see with sustainable market demands for greener products. So essentially that's the story that I have. That there's been these two tremendous changes that have taken place, and as a sign of how much companies have been changing based on these sort of compelling trends, can be seen with the Business Roundtable, which is in America, it's the top businesses of the country. You could say that they're pretty conservative, but in 2019 they came out with a new mission statement where they basically said that the Business Roundtable defines the purpose of a corporation is to promote an economy that serves all Americans. And in this statement, they went pretty deeply into, which many people were surprised at, saying that the company's mission was not just to make money. Now, if you look at the history of corporations, that actually, you go back like 100 years, and corporations never thought that their mission was only to make money. But starting in the 80s, that mindset had changed and got a little bit greedy. And the fact that the emphasis is now focusing on this broader set of principles of what companies can do to maintain their social license is heartening. I would, as someone who's been working in this field for a long time, I see this as very positive trends. But it doesn't mean that the race has been run, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of work to be done. But I'm heartened by the fact that there's a stronger connection between these sustainability concerns and environmental concerns and social responsibility and what corporations want to do in terms of being viable, successful enterprises. So,
Great.
onward and upward, everyone. And if you have any questions, I know we're a little bit over. Oh no, we're right about 2:30. So yeah, if there are any questions, we can take it there. And otherwise, I'm just glad to be able to share this information. And then we do have a question from Jean. What do you have to say?
I wondered if you could tell us about the impact of the acquisition of Whole Foods by Amazon.
Yes.
Did that turn into, what difference has it made towards its sustainability?
Well, in that story, we actually, I almost, I just finished reading a book called The Secret Lives of Groceries, written by Benjamin Lohr, who actually worked in a Whole Foods for a while and interviewed some of their top executives. And what happened is that as Whole Foods was starting off as a younger company, they had a lot of very local, the buyers had a lot of local power.
Yeah.
Because the company grew through acquisition. So there was a New England buyer and there was a Southern, Midwest buyer. And those buyers could champion products that they really felt were going to be good for the earth. And so they were able to waive all kinds of fees and provide really direct advice and support and grow those brands and basically scale them up. And what happened is that once those brands got big enough, they were able to jump ship over to the Targets and the Walmarts and all these other businesses. So basically Whole Foods, decades of being, you could call them sort of activist retailers going after and supporting products that had a lot of great characteristics. They made them so popular that then their differentiation, the fact that that store would only sell those products, made it that differentiation doesn't exist anymore. And so now you can buy many of those products, be they organic or grass-fed or whatever, at many other locations. Once that happened, it was right around the time when John Mackey looked around and he said, "We don't have a niche anymore. The only way our days are numbered because we have no way of distinguishing ourselves." And in fact, those decentralized business model they had was at a disadvantage to them, because if you have a company that just has one buyer for the whole country, that's a lot cheaper. You can up your what do I want to say, your
Volume.
Profit margin.
Yeah, you're probably, but you buy in larger quantities, so the per unit prices go down. So there's all these different reasons that their model wasn't working anymore, both in terms of their own decentralized structure, but also in terms of how differentiated they were from other stores. And so 2017 was when Whole Foods was sold to Amazon, and I think Mackey said their stores probably had another 8 years or 7 years before they were just going to be losing money every year. But Amazon wanted to move into the food business, and they also wanted to move in at a very high premium level. They wanted to come in with a really powerful brand that spoke of value. And so it was a really smart move for Amazon, and I think it was the best move for Whole Foods, although it is pretty much all of their activist purchasers and all the people who started with Whole Foods who were like these real true blue greens who wanted to change the world and do things, they all left after 2017, and all the Home Depot and Target and these big box store executives came in, and those are the people who are running this store right now. So it's not the best story. However, these products now are more ubiquitous. These sustainable products are now so much wider in terms of their reach and sale, and it's reflected in what consumers are buying. So it's a bittersweet story.
Thank you.
Over here, Rob, Naomi wanted to know that it seemed like there's lots of good progress, but it feels like the news from an environmental level just keeps on getting worse. And is there any way to, see that there's going to be I don't know, sorry to use this word, but a payoff in terms of reversing all the sort of climate and other sort of sustainable indicators that don't seem so rosy?
Yeah, I would say that the food system is more of it's in some ways just a reflection of what our society is interested in and what our needs are. And pretty much people want convenience. They want low prices. Um, Even though that there are these other considerations that are growing, which reflects sort of increasing anxiety that we have about our society and climate change and natural environments. The food system, I have to say, like food, I believe that food manufacturers and retailers aren't going to be they're going to be part of the equation. They're going to be partners in change, but we also are going to need that political change to take place as well. And so in terms of what the future holds, we're in a very challenging situation. I don't think that there's going to be a long-term quick fix that just happens. But I would rather be part of a mission that took these challenges seriously and was on the right side of history to try to focus on them and to try to make progress where we can.
Gail has her hand up.
Yeah, I see Gail. Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah. Oh, you could see me? I can't see anybody.
Oh, really? No, we can see you nicely. That's great.
Oh, that's funny. Anyway, I just want to thank you so much because I just feel more hopeful. And also,
Actually, excuse me, Rob, excuse me, Gail. Rob, maybe you can stop the share and then maybe Gail will be able to see you. Maybe it's the way her screen is set up. If you stop the share, maybe there we go. Yeah,
I should have done that a while ago.
There, yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about it.
There we go.
Hi. I'm hopeful because the environmental movement that the young people have been involved in, the climate issue. I wonder, since even these reports were done, whether we're going to see among younger people a change, more demands because of the environmental issues that are upon us, which weren't there so much a few years ago. What do you think about that?
I mean, I'm very heartened by the fact that all of these concerns are being translated into people's purchases. And yes, there might be these sort of craven marketing schemes that benefit from that.
Yeah.
But I think that from a political standpoint, from a social standpoint, these things are less and less, they're more and more emphasized, and they're more apparent, and they're more upfront, they're more mainstream. And that gives me a lot of hope. And then also, I think that as the rest of the world develops, that we meaning the U.S., but also developed countries set a set the I'm losing my words, an example for other countries. So I'm really heartened by that.
I am too. This is
A lot of this is from a first world perspective.
Yes. And in
And
fact,
there's much more non-first world out there.
yes. So there really are these two worlds. If you're in a developing country, if you're a world where the food system has not been consolidated, has not been industrialized, you're the majority of food that you're getting is from small landowners and small farmers. It's a completely different. It just it's hard for us to understand how that. It just they're already operating in a world where food is local. Food, and for the most part, doesn't use pesticides. Food, I mean, in some ways, it's where the industrialized world wants to go in terms of a healthier food system. But meanwhile, all those all those farmers are trying to use inputs that produce their production, and there's investment. I mean, that's all changing rapidly. But I agree with you. Developing world has a lot of their economic and their agricultural situations are completely different from what we have here in the U.S. It's hard to understand it unless you go there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob. This has been great.
Yes, thank you.
So interesting, and so glad to get into your brain and perspectives on stuff that I honestly just really did not know at all. So I'm really thrilled to be learning this, and so we will. I hope we'll have you back maybe to talk about about how we can control our costs in an environmentally sound way. We're thinking about that all the time around here. So you see Lillian and here Naomi and Jean are three members of our sustainability group. And Marilyn also. Marilyn, who's, you can't quite see, there she is. There's Marilyn sitting next to Lillian. So we have a group of people who are really focused on this, both at the local level, but also trying to think about, how can people here at CCB contribute more globally. So we will hopefully this will just be the first encounter in a longer relationship with you. So
I would love that.
Thank you.
I'm really
Thank
honored
you.
to be able to talk to you guys today, and I love the stories about the stores in Bronx.
Live long and prosper.
Exactly. All right. Thank you, Rob. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Rob.
This is on. If you'd like to see this again, or if things you didn't quite catch, you can find it on YouTube under Rabbi Jim Morgan. So thanks again to everyone who showed up, and we'll enjoy the next one. If you have ideas for next month, please be in touch. As always, I'm open to ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Saying something.
I'm sorry?
I thought Lillian, yeah.
Oh, Lillian, did you want to say something? Lillian, you're muted though, so make sure you unmute.
We do to reach the goal of being a leader in the world, okay, facing the political problems that we have. What can we do as individuals to try to reach that goal?
That's what we're working on.
That's exactly what we're working on. It's a great question. So we will, I think, based on what Rob was saying today, I would imagine that, his response would be something along the lines of, we have to remember that our individual decisions have an effect. What we choose to buy, what we choose to eat, how we choose to consume what we consume. We need to consume. We're living creatures, so we need to consume. We will have an effect on the world, and we can have sort of a better or a worse effect depending on what we do.
So we have what we want to do. We're going to have to figure out what we can do on a small local level. What can our community do? We can't look at the global picture.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to do our little, take care of our little garden, whatever it is.
But I think what's helpful about a conversation like this one is to recognize that if I choose those cage-free eggs, for instance, as opposed to the standard eggs, that I'm not alone in doing that. It's a local decision, but it's part of a larger movement. And so which is not in any way to deny what you're saying, Marilyn, is absolutely true. And at the same time, right, we need to be aware of what's going on in a larger context, so we can align what we're doing locally with what we want to see happen in a larger context. So both So both to be continued, Lily, and you're absolutely right. We will continue that question. What is it that we can do around here to move move the needle in the right direction.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
All right, we'll talk later.